Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Brazil once again, and we're going to have a look at yet another of the Brazilian beers that I bought in my recent order from Beerdome down in the Netherlands. Now, Beerdome is a web shop that I'd highly recommend. They've got some really interesting stuff in there from random countries around the world, but they seem to have a steady supply of Brazilian beers, so I'll definitely be making another Brazilian order from them at some point in the future. I'll need to keep an eye on their social media and see when their next kind of Brazilian drop is going to be. But when it comes to Brazilian beers, I have to say I've been very impressed so far with what I've tried. Before this order, I was only able to review 2 or 3 beers that had been given to me by my friend Fabrizio, who now lives in Iceland actually. But it's been really nice to be able to review some of these Brazilian beers for you. I'd been hearing for a long time that the Brazilian beer scene was really vibrant, and this order that I've had from Beerdome has really kind of proved that. And generally speaking as well, it's nice to see some Latin American beers making their way across to Europe, and fingers crossed Beerdome can bring us some stuff from the other Latin American countries as well. But I'm certainly looking forward to keeping up to date with what's going on in the Brazilian beer scene going forward. You will be seeing more Brazilian beers maybe at some point later on in the year as well, but I still have about 3 or 4 in the meantime, and those are the big imperial stouts actually, and I think I've got one more sour to take a look at as well. But yeah, for this review then, we are going to have a look at another brewery that I've never tried anything from. We're going to go to Curitita once again in Paraná in the south of Brazil, and we're having a look at my first beer from Cervejaria Moondri, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. So this particular beer is called Green Light. It comes in at 7.9% ABV, and they're describing this one as an Imperial IPA. So yeah, very, very curious to see what this one has in store for us. Fingers crossed it's another good beer, but like I said, I've been very impressed with the beers that I've had from Brazil so far. It seems to be that Curitiba and Sao Paulo actually are you know, the kind of craft beer places in Brazil actually, so I'm sure there's many other breweries out there as well that we've yet to discover. But yeah, I think I need to go down to Brazil at some point and have a little look at what they're doing down there, because the beers that I've had so far, as I've said, have been really, really nice actually. But yeah, very, very curious to see what this one has in store for us. Nice to introduce another new Brazilian brewery for you here on the channel, and I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this beer as well. So yeah, let's see how we get on then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Cervejaria Moondri. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for the Brazilian beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to fairly regularly at the moment because I still have some beers left from this order at Beerdome, and I do intend to do another one at some point later in the year. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review, especially if you're watching from down in Brazil or elsewhere in Latin America. It would be awesome to hear from you guys, but it's always great to hear from those of you that are watching the channel, and the support that you show me is hugely, hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Cervejaria Moondri then, and I will apologise in advance for any bad Portuguese pronunciations. It's a language that I am not familiar with at all, to be honest with you. So yeah, Cervejaria Moondri, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Curitiba in Paraná in the south of Brazil, and the brewery was founded back in 2017 by Maurício Francine and Adriana Drica Schneider. So they're a couple, and they've been homebrewers for about 4 years before they started the company, and then they got some good feedback on their beers, and this was what inspired them to turn professional. But the name Moondri apparently is a combination of their nicknames. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool actually, and I do hope that I'm pronouncing that correct or correctly. But Maurício studied brewing in Brazil, and he's the one who develops all of the recipes. Drica does take part in the brewing, but she's apparently more involved with the business and sales side of the brewery, and at the moment it's only the two of them running the company, but they're focused on building up their sales and exports as well, and that's probably why we've been able to get a hold of some of their stuff over here in Europe, but long may that continue. But the brewery apparently produces around 4,500 litres of beer per month, and as of March 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've produced around 15 different beers so far according to Untappd. But yeah, that is all the information I was really able to find on these guys. A very, very new company and still kind of building up, and a special thank you to Adriana for providing me with that information. I emailed them and they didn't reply to it, but then I messaged them through Instagram and they got back to me really quite quickly, which was great. So a big thank you to Adriana Drika for giving me the information on the brewery. From what I gather, she told me she doesn't speak English very well, so she used Google Translate to translate the stuff she wanted to get across to me. But yeah, big thank you to Drika for making this the information section in this video possible. But yeah, as I say, that's all I can really tell you. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this one then. I'm really curious about this. So as you can see, this one is actually a 473 milliliter can, which is 1 American pint. I think I paid about €8 or €9 for this beer. Now, that's one of the things. Brazilian beer is a little bit more expensive. My friend Fabrizio, who, as I said, now lives in Iceland, he told me that, yeah, craft beer in Brazil is actually quite expensive. They produce their own hops down there a little bit. They produce some of their own malts as well, from what I understand, but most of the stuff that they have is imported. You know, I think European malts, American, Australian, New Zealand hops and stuff like this. But I think that might be the next big thing when it comes to the Latin American beer scene, is maybe, you know, Argentine malt and hops and stuff like this. They've certainly got a lot of land down there that could be used to produce some really interesting ingredients for beer. So fingers crossed that's what we see develop over the next kind of 10 years or something like that. That would be very, very cool. But yeah, 473 milliliter can. This one I paid about €8 for it, so that's maybe about $9 American, and I guess maybe about £7 sterling, something like that. But the main reason for the Brazilian beers being quite expensive will of course be the import fees. The South American Confederation, I forget exactly what the name of it is, but the South American the South American equivalent, or the Latin American equivalent of the European Union, does not have a trade deal with the European Union, so we have to pay tariffs on these things as well. But I think even then, if you look at the prices on the Brazilian web shops, Brazilian craft beer is actually quite expensive, especially when you consider in Brazil that wages and stuff will be a little bit lower. But yeah, I didn't mind paying a little bit extra for something a bit random like this, so why not? But yeah, 473 milliliter can, this one, and it cost me about €8. So yeah, 7.9% Imperial IPA. This one uses the Falconer's Flight blend, which contains Cascade, Centennial, Chinook, Citra, Cluster, Columbus and Crystal. So yeah, I think this one could be really interesting. There's going to be a whole blend of different fruits and stuff coming out of this. But yeah, let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. I will point out that this beer will not be at its freshest, but we'll take it as it comes. I was struggling for quite a wee while to get the information on this brewery, but from what I gather, it's a West Coast IPA, so it might well have stood up a little bit longer, which is nice. But yeah, there's maybe about a quarter of it left in the can. That should be good for the moment. Yeah. So water, malts, yeast, lupullo. I need to learn the Portuguese words for like oats and wheat and things like this. We need to have a little look at that. But yeah, this one I have to say certainly looks very, very nice. Before the head disappears, you can see that it's poured with just under a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head, but it's already fading away just to be a very, very thin foamy layer, and I like how that goes together. But you can see just on the video there, if I shine the light through this one's a lovely kind of bright yellow colour actually. This is most definitely appearing more like a West Coast IPA. If I shine the light through this, you can see little tiny bits of sediment floating around in suspension there, which is going to happen. This beer has been in my fridge for a little bit because I was struggling to find the information on the brewery, but finally managed to sort that out. But yeah, it certainly looks very, very nice and definitely appears more like a West Coast IPA. It's got more of that kind of natural hazy sort of thing to it, rather than being big and thick and kind of soupy, if you like, soupy and gloopy as a New England IPA would be. But yeah, lovely bright yellow colour. This one actually kind of similar in appearance to the likes of Pliny the Elder and stuff like that. So yeah, it looks good. Remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on two things. One, the type of malts that you use in the first instance, and then two, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour out of the beer. And of course, barrel aging and adjuncts and things like that can affect it too, but those are not at play in this particular beer. But yeah, in terms of an IPA, nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance. So let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. I have to say, very, very curious. It does actually smell very nice. Still smells as if it's in fairly good condition as well, actually, I might add. But yeah, straight away with this beer, you do get a nice little bit of breadiness out of the base there. I do wonder if there is a little bit of wheat in this one. It's not uncommon to use a little bit of wheat in a West Coast IPA, but yeah, definitely a little touch of a sort of white bready thing in this one. You do get a little bit of a kind of bread crusty type quality as well, and you've got just a wee bit of a kind of caramelly biscuity sort of thing. It smells like a kind of typical, it does smell like a fairly typical West Coaster actually. That's nice, yeah, for sure. So yeah, like I say, definitely a bit of that. It's got a bit of that kind of crisp kind of pale malty type quality to it. I wouldn't be surprised if going from the aroma of this one, there might be a little touch of like some kind of lager malt in there as well, just to kind of crispen it up. You know, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Brazil, obviously a very hot, humid country from what I understand, so putting a little bit of lager malt in here just to give the beer a bit of crispness and drinkability, it would make sense. Quite a few Swedish breweries were actually putting a bit of Pilsner malt or a bit of lager malt in their IPAs for quite some time. And it was a nice touch actually, but it's quite difficult to describe the aroma of Pilsner malt sometimes. It just smells really crisp on the nose, and you get a little bit of that out of this beer for sure. So I'm pretty certain there's some sort of lager malt or Pilsner malt in here as well. But yeah, definitely a soft pale malty quality in there, giving you a bit of crispness. Some nice, some really nice, how would you say, a nice little bit of a nice little bit of that lager Pilsner malty kind of crispness. You can smell a bit of a thicker white bready note in there, definitely some bread crusty qualities as well. Then you've got a little bit of a sweet caramel and a little bit of a more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing coming out of the beer as well. So I mean, the aroma of this beer, I think goes together really quite nicely. The aroma on this one, the aroma on that on the malty side of things is kind of what you would expect. So yeah, a little bit grainy. It does become a little bit more kind of homeily and bready the more that you smell of it. But yeah, it's quite a typical smelling West Coast malt base on this one. So yeah, curious to see how that turns out. But on the hoppy side of things, it is kind of what you'd expect. There's a little touch of earthiness out of it, but not too much. On the green, in terms of the green component, this one's a big floral sort of thing. There's a little bit of spiciness to it, and you've got a little bit of spiciness to it, and you've got a wee bit of a kind of grassy, more citrusy kind of thing going on as well, which I really like. So yeah, the aroma that comes out of this one, I think, is on the green side of things, matches with what you would expect too. A nice big kind of spicy floral component. Not overly spicy right enough, but you can tell this beer is going to be a little bit more bitter, and it's got a little bit of a more kind of zesty, grassy sort of thing on the front of the nose as well. So yeah, I really like how this goes together. It gets a thumbs up from me on the green side of things. But let's look at the fruity side of the beer and see what we get, because obviously this Falconer's Flight thing they've got going on in here is a blend of 7 different hops, so there's going to be quite a bit of things going on in here. So yeah, for me, there's a wee bit of a passion fruity note to it. You can pick up a little bit of mango for sure, and I think, is there any more tropical fruit than that? It's actually a little bit hard to pick up the fruits in this one, because I think the green component, maybe because this beer's been sitting in the fridge a little bit more, the green component is coming out a little bit more. Either that, the other option is that I've got the COVID and I've lost my sense of smell, but I don't think that's, to be honest, I don't think that's likely actually. But yeah, the fruity aroma, there's definitely a wee bit of that stronger, more pungent passion fruit in there, a bit of an oily kind of mango, and I want to say that this actually leans a little bit more towards the citrusy side of thing. The Centennial, I'm getting a lot of that kind of lemony sort of thing from the Centennial on this one. There's a wee bit of lime in there as well, but I actually do find this beer to be quite you know, to be quite limey. So the Centennial for me is actually the component of that Falconer's Flight that's coming out the most. But yeah, you get a wee bit of the passion fruity sort of thing, which will be the Citra. There might even be a little bit of a stronger grapefruit from the Chinook as well, to be honest. But then you get the juicy mangoes as well. And yeah, other than that, I don't really know what to say on the fruity side of things. I think I'm losing a little bit of the fruits in this one, just because the green component is quite strong, to be honest with you. So yeah, to me this one comes across as more kind of lemony and limey and citrusy, but you can get a little bit of the tropical fruit behind it, a softer tropical fruit, and a bit more of a kind of pungent thing as well. So I do appreciate how that side of things goes together in this one too. So yeah, the aroma in this one is quite nice. Definitely a typical West Coast smelling IPA, to be honest with you, but there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a huge fan of my West Coasters. But yeah, take a bit of time and enjoy the aroma before you get stuck into it. Let's have a taste of this beer then and just see how we get on. So this one is the Green Light 7.9% Imperial IPA from Cervejaria Moondri in Curitita in Paraná in the south of Brazil. Let's get stuck into this one. Slanja, Skol and Felicidades, if I'm remembering my Portuguese rightly. Cheers. That's held up pretty well, actually. I'm going to say that about this one for sure. That has held up pretty nicely. So thumbs up to Cervejaria Moondri. I didn't expect it to pardon me, to come across quite in the way it has, but that has held up pretty damn solidly. I'm impressed with that. So yeah, that is pretty interesting. But yeah, as you can see, this one thing I think I actually forgot to mention with this, that they did, Adriana did say to me that they wanted to have a little bit of a kind of luau vibe on their artwork. I forgot that. They wanted to have a little bit of that Hawaiian kind of luau vibe on their artwork. So I have to say that's worked out quite nicely for them. It looks very, very good. But yeah, I'm going to just say thumbs up to them. This is a nice, solid West Coast IPA. I think most of the IPAs that we had in this Brazilian order were actually New England's. So it's nice to have something a wee bitty different. And as I say, I just went through the list that they had on Beer Dome and just tried to pick one from each brewery so that I could cover as many different breweries as possible with the Brazilian order, and it worked out very nicely. Yeah. But yeah, where do we start with this one then? This is just a really solid West Coast double IPA. Doesn't do anything surprising, but it's just really nicely crafted. And you know, these days there's so many beers and breweries out there that's as much as you can ask for, to be honest. So yeah, let's break down the flavour of this one then. So straight away across the middle of your palate, you can feel that nice sort of pale malty bready base on this one. That just blankets the middle of your tongue. That is the backbone of the beer. If you go towards the back of that middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of a wee bit of that kind of lager malty note there. The pale malt or whatever base malt they're using in this one is giving you a little bit of kind of crispness, if you like. But I would have a feeling, I do wonder, the malt in this beer feels different. And as I've said in other reviews, the Brazilians are producing some of their own malt, and it's a bit, there's part of me wants to say it's a little bit like a kind of, the malty note that you get in this one is like a little bit like a German lager malt in some ways, but it also has some of the characteristics of like some of the American malts, like the Crystals and the Two Rows and things like that. It's got a little bit of that going on in this one as well. So yeah, I really would be curious to learn a little bit more about the Brazilian malt producers and the hop varieties and stuff. But yeah, the malty side of this beer is quite nice. So like I say, quite a pale malty, white bready sort of thing, blankets in the middle of your tongue. It does crispen up a little bit the more that you have of it, and then at the back of that middle third of your palate, you can feel there is a little bit more of a kind of lagery crispness. In the centre in the centre of your palate, you do get a little bit of a more concentrated, boozy, alcohol-y sort of thing. As you move out from the centre of that, you get a little bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive sort of biscuity thing there. So this one, it's kind of got a good balance between being, when it comes to West Coast IPAs, I've always said, well, more recently I've said I've always thought that West Coast IPAs were big and oily, but in more recent times, since I had the likes of Pliny the Elder, I've realised these beers can actually be quite light in their malt base and almost crisp in a sense. This beer does have a similar vibe to it, like Pliny the Elder. So yeah, it's got a really nice sort of concentrated brown sugary kind of thing in the very centre of your palate, and as you move further out from that, it gets a little bit more sort of biscuity, a little bit more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity like, and you can just feel the sort of pale malty, soft bready kind of note underneath that. And like I said, at the back of that front third of your palate, you start that middle third of your palate, sorry, you seem to get a little bit of a kind of lager malty kind of crispness. So yeah, the malty side of this beer is quite straight shooting, but I think it suits the overall profile of the beer quite nicely. But yeah, on that border region between middle and back third of your palate, you can feel the breadiness just kind of concentrates a little bit and thickens up, and you can feel there's a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty graininess in there as well. But if you go to the rear of that middle third of your palate, you get a nice, how would you say, you definitely have a nice little bit of, how would you say, more kind of yeasty component in there. So you can feel there's a little bit of a kind of grainy bitiness at the very back of your palate, but on top of that, you get a more sort of yeasty quality coming out of the beer, which I think works, very, very well. So I really like that about this beer as well. So yeah, I mean, you can feel with this one the thickness in the back third of the palate. As you move further forward, it gradually just comes away. Then you reach the border region between middle and back third of your palate. Then it drops away quite tightly, and then it becomes quite condensed as you move further forward. So I really like how that side of things goes together as well. So yeah, the malty and yeasty side of things in this, I think, works together very, very well. You will get one or two tiny little woody notes pushing their way up through this beer. If you go to the front corners of your palate, then diagonally back, I think there's one or two little kind of woody-ish type notes push their way out of the malt base as well. But other than that, I don't think there's too much to say about the malty side of this beer. It goes together really nicely. But on the hoppy side of things then, in the back corners of the palate, we'll focus on the hops now. In the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness. As you move further forward, you get a lot of big kind of floral aromatic notes out of this one. It does develop a little bit of spiciness as you kind of go further forward, but then round the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy, and it does have a wee bit of a kind of zesty note to it. I'm just surprised at how well this beer's kind of held up, to be honest with you. I think obviously it would be, I think it said on the can, was this supposed to be 70 IBUs or something? Yeah, it says 77 IBUs. I'm surprised at that actually. I think now maybe the IBU count has dropped a little bit, but it still gives you a nice kind of floral aromatic green component, and that's exactly what you want from a West Coaster. You do want a bit of that big hoppiness there. Yeah, the floral notes you get out of this are really nice, and it just gives you that little bit of bitterness that you would want from a West Coast IPA, like I said. But yeah, the fruity side of things in this beer is very nice too, but the green component, I think, is very true to the style. So let's focus on those fruity side of things, and I'm interested that this one, it's not single hopped obviously, it's using a hop blend, but Falconer's Flight, I don't think I've ever had a beer that uses only Falconer's Flight on its own, so this is quite an experience in itself. So yeah, fruity wise, the fruits come across as really nice and oily. Again, as I always say, on that front third of your tongue, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. But on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit of a, kind of, there is a little bit of a more kind of bready sort of thing in there. You've got a nice little bit of kind of bread crusty sort of thing in there as well. You do get a little bit more of a kind of grainy bread crusty sort of thing going on, but underneath that front third of your palate you can feel there is a bit of that sort of pale malty crispness there too, and on top of that you've just got the nice oily fruity kind of things. But yeah, when it comes to the fruity side of this beer, at the back of that front third of your palate you do get a nice kind of pardon me, passion fruity quality coming out of the beer. As you go beyond that, it's a little bit more kind of mango like and oily, and then as you move further forward it starts to get a little bit more zesty, to be honest with you, and that's when you can feel the Centennial and things coming out. I'd be curious to know what the ratio of the blend in this beer is, but for me this Falconer's Flight, it's got, as I say, 7 hops in it. You can detect the kind of strong passion fruity notes, which I would suggest are from the Citra. Then as you move forward you get the mangoey notes, which again I would say is the Citra. Underneath you can pick out a little bit of that almost slightly figgy sort of thing, which is Cascade. Cascade's got a very distinctive kind of almost red fruity type quality to it, I think, but it can promote some of the stronger grapefruit notes as well. But on the front half of that front third of your palate, that's where you get a little bit more of a kind of oily type thing out of it. So you get a nice sort of lemony citrusy note. You get a bit of a more limey quality pushing its way out of the beer a bit later on as well. So yeah, I can appreciate how this how all of that goes together. It's a really just nice solid beer, this one. It actually comes across, it's very similar in what it's going for. I would suggest that probably what this beer is going for is to be something similar to the likes of Pliny the Elder or something. It's one of these more kind of lighter and breadier West Coast, lighter bready and biscuity West Coast IPAs rather than a big thick oily caramelly sort of one, if you like. That's what this beer is really trying to do, and it pulls it off quite well actually, or really quite well I would say. So thumbs up to Cervejaria Moondri for this. I think they've got a solid beer here. So yeah, certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink this again, and if they've got some different beers from these guys the next time I do my pardon me took a little bit of the liquid down the wrong way there, but if they've got more beers from these guys on Beer Dome the next time I order, I certainly will make sure I get another Moondri beer, absolutely. But yeah, let's look at the mouthfeel then, just to round off this review. So in terms of the mouthfeel and stuff then, I would describe this beer as being mid-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's got a little bit of an oily character to it, I would say. Yeah, I'd say, you know, I don't know if mid-body is quite right. Maybe top end and mid-bodied, smooth carbonation. It's got a bit of a sort of oily slickness to it. You kind of expect this from a West Coast IPA. And overall it is kind of what you'd expect on that basis. But yeah, the malty backbone of this beer is really nice and really smooth. It's got a little bit of crispness in there. You've got a good little bit of hoppy bitterness. To say, it says on the can 77 IBUs. I think some of that might have gone away, but the more that you go into the aftertaste, you do get a little bit of that. You do definitely get a little bit of that coming out of the beer for sure. And then on the fruity side of things, it's got that little bit of oily slickness that you expect of the West Coast IPAs. So yeah, a really solid rendition of a West Coast double IPA for me, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink more beers from this brewery on the basis of this one. So yeah, I'll need to have a look at their other beers and see what they have. But yeah, if I see another Moondri beer on Beer Dome, I certainly will order up another one for the next lot of Brazilian reviews. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This one was the Green Light 7.9% Imperial IPA, a West Coast style double IPA basically, from Cervejaria Moondri in Curitita in Paraná in the south of Brazil. Really enjoyed reviewing this one. This is the last IPA you'll see me review from my first Beer Dome Brazilian order. I've got one more sour to do, and then we're on to the big Imperial Stouts, and I think there's 3 Imperial Stouts if I remember rightly. But yeah, still a few Brazilian beer reviews for you to come over the next little while. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Cervejaria Moondri. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers from these guys are. Let me know any other Brazilian breweries that you would recommend to check out. I would love to learn a little bit more about other Brazilian brewery names to keep an eye out for. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to review this one. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and I hope that you've been enjoying this Brazilian mini-series. Slàinte, skål, cheers, thanks for watching, and do make sure you check out Cervejaria Moondri. Lovely, really nicely executed West Coast double IPA, this one. Cheers, felicidades.